what's his name, Julius, EFF and ANC is not as fractured as the Zuma and ANC.
Maybe the opportunity for EFF is to become a reasonable party.
South Africans are not united in this logic.
Yeah.
They are divided in this logic. Because what he's done with them in KZN is complete annihilation. He removed them from the face of the earth.
Welcome to the State of the Nation, and we are really blessed today because we have royalty in the house. Royalty, a man who is an entrepreneur, a radio personality, and he is the king, and that is King David Mashabela.
Yeah.
David, welcome to the State of the Nation.
Thanks for the invitation. I don't know what I've done to deserve this invitation.
We just now and again, we just need to bless ourselves with the king, No, but obviously we were on podcast and chill together.
Interesting debate.
Interesting debate. That was before the election. We were shouting each other down with a few numbers and things like that. I must say, David is way too nice a person to be shouting like some of the rest of us. You can see veins in the rest of us. He just has a bit of a...
None of that.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, we thought it would just be good to have somebody out there. You obviously keep an eye on South Africa. You're a concerned South African, somebody with a microphone. Mm-hmm. We've just finished the election and quite a surprise outcome.
I don't think it's that surprising. To those who understand ANC politics, they'll tell you that it was expected. And those who understand it even more, they'll say it was expected to be even worse than this because of the division. Remember, this is a ANC election. If you think about it, it's the ANC that won the election, but a divided ANC.
Right.
A Zuma ANC and a Ramaphosa ANC, so to speak, because the Ramaphosa side, they're very clear that it's not a Ramaphosa ANC. So that's what it is. And if you're to really analyze it further, you'll even realize that the Zuma ANC is probably smaller than a lot of people thought it was. If you really look at how much he got, particularly compared to the Ramaphosa side, if you look at the national vote. In KZN, I think that was a big surprise for a lot of people, including IFP. Definitely, ANC is shocked at these results. But nationally, I thought Zuma will do much better than he did.
Really?
I really did. I thought the closer it got to the election, I said, this guy, the excitement. And they gave him all those votes.
Yes.
They kept him in the news every day.
It was catastrophic handling of a crisis management, isn't it?
Absolutely.
It's one of those that when you're doing workshops, when they bring up examples of things handled really badly, BlackBerry, when the company went bankrupt because the BlackBerry Messenger,
Nokia had the same problems.
Same problems, and these things are held up as corporate disasters. Well, in terms of political disasters, from a PR point of view, and a sort of strategic point of view, it was unbelievable blunder, wasn't it?
Even Julius says it, that he warned Ramaphosa not to arrest this guy. Well, let me say, it's not like Ramaphosa arrested him, but not to have him arrested, because it'll turn him into a hero.
Yeah.
And we know what happened. Because if you think about it, ANC in the last elections got, 57%. Yeah. Now they got 40. If you take Zuma's 14, it means technically ANC got 54%. So it's even lower than what's expected. The question is that the Zuma, the vote, is it all of it? And I can tell you almost with confidence that he's way more popular than this. Some people were a little uncertain about what he's doing.
Well, before one ascribes his whole sort of 14.5% to disgruntled ANC voters, it looked to me like you can put about 50% of that would have gone to the ANC and 25% each to the EFF and the IFP.
Yeah.
That then brings you back to the numbers that everybody was talking about from a long time ago, where the ANC was going to get somewhere in the high 40s and the EFF were going to grow to maybe 13.5 and the IFP around sort of 6. Then it kind of makes sense.
Yes.
Right? But the question I want to put to you, firstly, before we sort of go into then sort of ask you your views on the implications and things. Do you think, because you mentioned earlier that it's kind of like an ANC election, when these parties split, right, what informs the idea that they are naturally going to get back together again? Do you think that's a fair assumption?
you can apply that example to a marriage. It's unpredictable.
Yeah.
We don't know how deep are these wounds that led to the separation. But that's what will inform whether they'll ever get back together. I think that the marriage between Julius, EFF, and ANC is not as fractured as the Zuma and ANC. The Zuma and ANC is fractured. You're talking about a guy that ended up in jail. You're talking about a guy who was a leader of this political party, who was called one random Friday evening and he was told, "You're no longer boss."
Yeah.
And they had to drive to go tell him this. And he said, "But why don't you let me finish this? I have another few months to go." And they said, "No, you have to leave now." We don't know how deep those cuts are. And it's possible that they're very, very deep. And also, in a marriage, when two people are fighting, as spectators, we can look at it and think that these people are still okay. They're still friendly to each other, but one is holding a deeper grudge than the other. We don't know.
Yeah.
One thing that's become very clear is that Zuma has a grudge, and you and I will never know how deep it is, and he will continue to use that grudge to show the ANC, that he's the man. He continues to say, "I am trying to help the ANC by doing all of this. I am trying to return it to the real ANC." That's what he keeps saying. That's a guy who's holding a deep, deep grudge.
Yeah. The reason I raise that point is that I think it's important for context, because in the history of politics, I've never seen a breakaway rejoin.
That's true. Yeah.
Yet, and for example, nobody's going up saying, "Well, I think Herman Mashabela is going to take action." He's saying, "Go back to the DA." I don't see that happening. Nobody's even sort of raising that as a possibility. I'm very curious as to why it's happening, and I think that Zuma's playing another game by saying he wants to go back to the ANC, by dangling that carrot to his voters so that they can think that, yes, I'm voting for MK, but it's just more of a corrective measure to the ANC, when I don't think he has any intention of going back. I also think that what Prince Mashabela said on this show, certainly I buy, and that is that this is purely a vehicle for the Zuma family.
Hey, look, there might be truth in that. Even today, Sowetan talks of that it's it's another ploy for the Zuma family to get access to resources and all of that. I think that narrative clearly is cemented in people's minds. Whether true or not, it's clearly how people see former President Jacob Zuma. I personally don't think that is the real motive. I think the real motive is a guy who just wants to show them that I'm still worthy.
Yeah.
I still have political currency, and one that you should have seen and should have continued to use. Because what he's done with them in KZN is complete annihilation. He removed them from the face of the earth. And for me, that's a guy who's saying, don't forget how much power I got.
You know, David, I'm so reminded whenever I see Jacob Zuma of Donald Trump. Interestingly, I did a leadership seminar when we were still doing a lot of that kind of work, and we had a satellite interview with Donald Trump.
Okay, wow.
This must have been in 2006 when he was just very popular because of The Apprentice.
He was a TV guy.
Nobody thought that he was going to be president. And, he was giving his rules for business, which in typical Donald Trump fashion were all over the show, really sort of that sort of stuff. But then he said he's got these 6 ideals, and he gave them the normal kind of businessy thing.
Yeah.
And he said, I've got number 7.
Okay.
He says, number 7 I've got. He says, I always get even. I always get even.
It's also in one of his books.
Yeah.
It's a whole paragraph on that I will get back.
He says, it takes me the rest of my life. I'm going to get even to anybody that wronged me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you saw it in his response after he lost the election, and he voted Mike Penn. He wants to get even with this guy and that guy. I think that Jacob Zuma falls into that category, where he would, before he goes down under to go and meet the ancestors, he is going to want to get even with anyone.
He will fix all these things.
It all up, yeah.
I think he's already done that with this election.
Oh, sure.
This is a deep, deep cut that the ANC is going through now.
So, a couple of things. In your opinion, do you see... I'm struggling to see what the glue is that holds MK together.
Yeah, well, it's Zuma, but carry on.
Yeah, but I'm saying he's the totem, he's the guy. But from here on out, already they don't want to go to Parliament. Already they want to take everybody to court.
They want to revote.
They want to revote, yeah. And I said to Tlamulo and Lela when he was here, I said, I can't believe that you enjoy going to court so much. It's a terrible experience, and I don't know why. Why you embrace it so much, but clearly they do.
You have to give it to Zuma as well for really exposing the cracks in our constitution, or maybe things that needed to be tested. I remember I had a chat with a CEO of the IEC, Sai Mamabolo, and I asked him the very question that you have to appreciate what Zuma has done for all of us, really, to just always stress test the Constitution so much. He said, that's a fact. Nobody has done it as far as he has. He's pulled it all the way. Even now, he was talking about going to the UN and all of that. So you're talking about a guy who will never rest until he really gets what he wants. But you're right, to have so much energy and stamina to keep going to sit in the dock and all of that, it's not a pleasant place.
No, it's not pleasant.
But how he does it over and over and over again, I don't understand it.
Yeah, but so as we sit here now, there's a lot of question marks as to what the next step is for South Africa.
Big one.
There's a couple of permutations being discussed. What's your feeling?
It's tricky, because it really depends on the the appetite that ANC has. Because they're the ones that brings the bigger share of this. They're likely to go with, because listen to this, and these are story reports in the news. There are some who are saying Gwede Mantashe in particular wants to go with MK.
Yes.
And some that are saying that's not going to happen, not in our lifetime. And there are some that are saying ANC is easier working with EFF because they've done it before in municipalities. And for those municipalities to be done, negotiations happen with Julius and Floyd and all of that. So there's someone saying that's an easier transition and one that they're familiar with. And there's a strong view that I think the mainstream media pushes this harder than anyone, that says DA and ANC. But I think there's a fundamental difference in how they see the world. Yeah. That they will struggle to connect. And here's another counter argument. The war in Gaza, they say the ANC and DA sees the world very different when it comes to that. And there are some voters that are going to say, but I gave you my vote because I think you see the world this way. And now you're betraying us by giving this vote to either the DA or ANC in this context.
Yeah, I think that's a red herring. Certainly that foreign policy one. Mm-hmm. I really don't see that as being germane to a potential partnership, purely because it doesn't really matter in a South African context, right? Mm-hmm. So, if it's going to be a coalition or partnership in whatever sense it is, something that falls outside of the country, I don't think is going to affect those discussions.
The deciding factor.
I don't think it's going to become the deciding factor.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people are trying to dress it up as something problematic issue. But clearly the discussions are underway. To go back to Gwede Mantashe, I think that people must maybe have forgotten just how close he was to Jacob Zuma. I mean, I certainly, as a political watcher, was shocked when he turned on Jacob Zuma because he had been his main defender.
Yeah, for a long time. And there's been apparently in the latest press, there's a meeting that was meant to happen on Tuesday, today, when we're recording this, and it didn't happen because they found that within the National Executive Committee of the ANC, there are some people who are playing spy to Zuma. And that's what the news says. I don't know how true that is. So part of those meetings had to be cancelled and those meetings to be postponed. Now they're trying to fish out all these guys who were either sending information to Zuma or not. All these are conspiracies. We don't know how true that is. But I can tell you for sure, Gwede and Jacob had a very good relationship. It clearly didn't work, but does the brotherhood remain? We don't know. It probably still remains.
Yeah, I certainly. So, where would your, if you had to put money on it right now, what is your thinking?
EFF, ANC with a smaller party.
PA, obviously, because they're already partners.
Yeah, half. I'm not sure if the ANC is particularly excited with PA, but you never know. And also a DA-ANC coalition. There's a report in Independent Online that was posted on Sunday night that says it's going to create a Yabas environment. Let me explain a Yabas environment. That where there's a phrase in Setswana that says I'll tell you in English. If you want to get a black man to do anything, get a white man to instruct him. That phrase has been there forever and ever and ever. I can tell you though, a modern South African does not agree with that phrase entirely, and now already
be angered by that.
Yeah, of course. So there's an article that speaks to that. It speaks to the whole idea of a Yabas type of environment where the ANC will now be having to ask for permission from this guy every time before they do anything. And they say that could be at the heart of some of the differences that members of the ANC, NEC in particular, have. And they say, we can't do that. We know how this looks like. There's no way we should be doing this partnership. We don't know. Here's another conspiracy, though, that says the funders, the cabal, the secret society that pays for all of this, that makes sure that the country runs. They are saying, you guys have to sort this nonsense. ANC-DA, get together and fix this. Just work together and figure it out. That's another conspiracy. So we are likely to see a ANC-DA because of the funders, if that theory is true.
Yeah, look, I think there's a lot of credence to that, although I don't think there's one puppet master doing that. I think that is a common sense thing, because I don't think you want to be here the day after they announce the other coalition. Right?
Mm-hmm. What do you think?
I, as you would imagine, have a strong view on these things. And I actually think that the ANC-DA, IFP hookup makes a lot of sense.
ANC-DA, IFP.
Yeah.
Okay.
IFP is a little bit too...
They may not need IFP national. They'll have enough.
But bring them along anyway, because it sort of calms a lot of people down. But I don't think it's going to happen. And I'll explain to you why. I have been a bookmaker. And when one bets...
Are you a successful bookmaker?
I'm doing podcasts now, so I don't think I was that successful. But one of the successes with being a good gambler is to somehow take your heart out of your decision. Right? So let's say I'm a Kaizer Chiefs supporter and they're playing against your Mamelodi Sundowns. My heart says, back Kaizer Chiefs. My wallet says, I'm going to lose my money, I'm going to back Sundowns. So, on that, I think that what you've got to look at now is let's take this statement as a given, that it's in the best interest of the country for the ANC and the DA to get together. Let's just say. Okay?
That's the Sundowns bet.
That's the Sundowns bet. But, no, that's the sort of accepted wisdom.
Okay.
But we are not looking at the man, not looking at the person. The people would... There's a problem with that line of thinking, and that is for the ANC to accept that deal. We've already touched on the foreign policy question. I don't think it's a major question, but it's a question. It helps in the argument.
Yeah.
I think that the biggest argument comes around the fact that the DA in that setup would struggle, because they also have a constituency to answer to.
Yeah.
And they would have to be seen to be doing something about corruption. And those people who are negotiating, I mean, I had to laugh when I saw that their negotiating team is Fikile Mbalula, Nomvula Mokonyane, and Gwede Mantashe. And I think to myself, all three of them should go to jail.
Naturally, right? they would select the top 6, 7 in this regard.
But all three of them have got a smell of corruption around them, right?
I'm surprised that the president is not in that team. But anyway, it's a different argument.
That's actually a done thing, because John Steenhuisen isn't in the DA team.
Yeah, I noticed that. I noticed that as well.
But so it's one of those cases of let my people speak to your people. It's okay, fine. But now you're going to be in that negotiation. These guys are going to sit there and say, look, we'll enter into this, but we're going to have to clamp down on corruption. And you're thinking to yourself, oh, Nomvula Mokonyane drives around an Aston Martin, right?
I don't know that.
No, she does.
Okay.
That's a fact, right?
Yes.
And she's going to say it's from her hard-earned money. Absolutely not. You don't buy a 4 million rand car out of your hard-earned money. It's impossible unless you're a company director or you've done really well. So suddenly, if I'm negotiating and I look at this and I'm thinking to myself, I do this deal, I'm going to go to jail.
Yeah. From which perspective?
From the negotiators on behalf of the ANC.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
We know that MK is set up purely to stop judicial processes. Why? Because they're not negotiable is we scrap the Constitution.
Yes, of course. Which is an unlikely...
But the point is that their whole reason for being is to stop for people being held to account.
Yeah.
Now that suits those negotiators just fine. Because the wisest words, who would have thought that the wisest words ever spoken in South Africa would have been spoken by Bathabile Dlamini?
When you said we all have skeletons.
We all have those Smolanyana skeletons.
Yes.
And right now, if you do have a party that comes in that says, let's clean this place up.
Let's find the skeletons.
Let's find those skeletons. So it's just a hell of a lot easier to not deal with it. There's also another reason that I don't think that the DA ANC thing, or I'm a little bit doubtful on it, is that the ANC would lose all credibility in the eyes of many black voters,
Of course.
majority of black
Absolutely.
voters, right? And looking forward, like, what is their best outcome? It works. Well, then it looks like when you brought in these white guys, it works. Therefore, I'm not going to vote for you again. If it doesn't work, well, then goodbye ANC because you did this bad deal.
True.
So I see it as short-term great, medium-term bad, long-term terrible.
For both of them.
For both of them.
Yeah.
I do think that in that case, the DA could extricate themselves. I don't think the DA are as vulnerable, right, in this thing, even if they had to go do, because they can walk away from a deal saying we did it with the best interests and this guy did this, and, you know, I don't think they're going to lose their support too much. But I do think that right now, if they do a deal with MK-EFF, nobody goes to jail.
Everybody
can steal money, right? Buy them, together. The band's back together again, because I do think that the first coalition, whoever it is, whichever side it goes to, is going to have hell.
Yeah, but there's enough training, and a lot of people question the possibility of coalition working at all because of the local government election experience. I think it's important for us to start talking about possible legislative coalition, but that's a different argument. It won't happen overnight anyway. But it is time that we started talking about how we structure it. If you're bringing 30 votes or 30%, 40%, this is what you get, all of that. It should be legislated. However, we have a situation in Johannesburg where we have a mayor who brought in 2 seats to the table. That shows that he was placed there to hold power in the meantime while we are busy doing other things. So those are possible challenges. But your theory is right from a perspective that a black vote will say to the ANC, you couldn't have done this. If they look at long term, the ANC will say, this DA-ANC coalition may not be a good idea for the longevity of the party unless we are happy to see it go forever. And here's another reason. Once ANC lost Western Cape, they never regained it, never even came close. They wouldn't want to take a chance of putting someone in power who could easily take the entire cake in the end, which is what the DA has done over time. Even the PA tried but couldn't shake them. The EFF tries, doesn't shake them. It's pretty obvious that wherever the DA goes, there are people who follow them. Whether the narrative of
you
a
could
good
even extend
government
that
or not.
you could even extend that to Gauteng. I think that people don't concentrate when they analyze what the DA has done in Gauteng, in the cities, where they built
I'll question Tshwane, but keep going.
No, what I'm saying is where they've built up a support base, they don't really lose it.
No, they don't. However, their gains are very small.
Very small.
Yes,
but
very, very small. But they don't lose it. I honestly thought that the DA would lose some voters this time around. Even if it's 1-2%. I was surprised that they retained and held on to it. That's why some people are saying some of the losers of this election, not only is it the ANC, it's also EFF, because they did not gain anything. They did not move further. They're saying, well, we gave back the votes. Julius was saying that, well, it clearly means these votes were not ours. They belonged to Msholozi, and he took his votes back. But it still questions their own growth.
Yeah.
It's very minuscule, so much so that some people are starting to wonder if they'll remain at this level for the long haul.
Okay, so then on that point, that's a brilliant segue to another possibility that people aren't taking into account.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, and this sounds a little crazy, ANC-DA EFF coalition.
Very crazy.
I'll tell you why it sounds crazy, but then maybe not. And that is, you know, I think when we were last together, I made the point of Julius in a suit. You know, those kind of optics are trying to send out a message. Julius, suddenly we're not going to nationalize all the banks, only going to start a bank. Suddenly he started to sound like an ANC politician again, right? And if they're going to get out crazied by MK, maybe the opportunity for EFF is to become a reasonable party, right?
I think they are reasonable, but carry on. They're not
You didn't read their manifesto.
No, they're not as extreme.
They are. If you look at their manifesto,
Okay,
their manifesto is to be believed.
That's fine. Okay. Conclude
But
your
you're
thought.
saying, okay, so let's just say, I don't think, you know, yes, I carry on about their manifesto because, you know, if you read all 200 pages of it, it's
290.
Yeah, I did read most of them. It is kind of a... But I think if you had read the ANC's manifesto in 1994, if there was such a thing, it would have said exactly the same things. So, you know, there's that big dose of reality you get when you get close to power. You know, it's very easy as a revolutionary to say,
we're
going to burn this place down, we're going to nationalize this, and then somebody pulls you into a room and says, can I explain to you how this really works? You know, and suddenly everybody starts sounding like your father. The next thing you look back in the mirror, you say, geez, I'm sure that's what my father used to say.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's that ridiculous.
It's not necessary. The numbers don't need it. The numbers are enough for ANC-EFF or ANC-DA. They don't necessarily need the third person in that relationship. EFF's numbers they need an extra 0.1 to push it to 50. So they don't necessarily need that extra vote. So the three of them together, it's not that necessary. And I don't think that's where the conversation is going. And one thing that John Steenhuisen kept on saying is that there's a fundamental difference between us and the EFF. It's so fundamental that if you build this house on this foundation, it's not going to hold. And that's the argument that he continues to use, which I understand fully. You know, if you don't see the world, you believe in a different religion to mine, and we want to go and build this relationship, it's likely to show cracks eventually. And that's really where John Steenhuisen is saying. But one thing that EFF has indicated is that they're happy and ready to join government now. Julius made it very clear. He said, we are coming in and we're ready to be part of government. We're ready to be ministers, already picking different ministerial positions there. So there's no need for a third party in that dialogue, so to speak.
Yeah. I think that there is a need for the third party regardless.
Okay.
Purely as a sort of like for the optics.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
But the numbers don't need it.
No, because sometimes these things are, you know, optics matter, and even if the numbers don't need it, and also, I think that there's a lot of experience of what happens with these wafer thin majorities where you've got 50.5%. You know, they're very unstable, and I think that anybody that negotiates will want a significant.
So you'd rather have
you'd rather get to 70%,
a 60 with the DA and ANC.
Yeah, but then throw in another 10%, and then you've got a proper majority, and then it's very hard for the rest to. So it's.
But if you've seen it in the past, Mike, you'll realize that it works in the beginning. Ekurhuleni, Tshwane, City of Johannesburg, Eastern Cape, even KZN. It works in the beginning. City of eThekwini. It works in the beginning. We agree. We're good. Then we start. We are 70%. It's the three of them. A month later, we don't agree fundamentally on certain issues because now we're almost a family altogether. We have to meet often and discuss these things, and our cracks are starting to show. Otherwise, we would not have changed mayors so often in these municipalities if indeed this union was cemented It's clearly not cemented. We agree now for the first 2 weeks, 2 days or whatever, and next week we don't see the world the same anymore. We remember that actually I don't really like you. And then it changes things again. I would hate for the next 5 years for us to have 4 new presidents.
Yeah, I agree.
And that would have happened in the 4 years or 5 years of the next term. That would be a disaster. It has already happened in municipalities. Some say municipalities are too small scale for us to learn anything from. I think they are important as a case study for us to learn
I think they are a case study, and I do think that I think that there's also, I reckon, in some of the analysis, not a lot of credit given to 2 things, and that is to one thing, and that is to look back at the actual performance. Right, the ANC has always behaved like their performance doesn't matter. Oh, corruption, it's just Wayne divinated
in public.
In public,
in public, they appear like they're not phased.
They're not phased.
Yeah.
But I think this is the first time that they've truly seen that people have had enough of this, right?
Look, the South African voter did not mince their words. They're clear that this is not good.
Yeah.
Whatever you're cooking, we don't like it. You think it's good. You present it as good. Even the president, weird State of the Nation address the day before elections is another testament to that. He painted a glorious picture of South Africa. He spoke more. He spoke about the Guptas for the first time in a while. He spoke about corruption and all of that for the first time in a while. And that shows you what he was trying to do. But South Africans are saying, we hear you, but we don't believe you. Yeah. For the first time, the ANC knows that South Africans do not believe the story that they tell. Yeah. And the elections have. But again, we have to acknowledge that 6 million South Africans still believe the story.
Yeah.
40% of the voters still believe the story. Yeah. So there's still that we can't ignore that audience at all.
I just think that we could, and maybe I'm just hoping. I think that there could be a new wind blowing through South African politics, and the simple thing is that actions have consequences. Right? If you guys are going to squabble over the money, and then you want me to look the other way, or the electricity goes off, or the rubbish isn't collected, etc., the voters now, they're never going to put this genie back in the bottle.
I think now politicians are aware of it.
Yeah.
Not only ANC.
All of them.
I think they're all aware that this is borrowed time. South Africans, they understand what they understand about politics. What's clear is that the lived experience is not what they're hoping for, and they're not afraid to say it.
Yeah.
But we cannot ignore what really shifted these elections.
Yes.
It's the Zuma vote. We can't ignore that at all. The Zuma vote is at the heart of what has happened here. And one can easily argue that, does Zuma have skeletons in his closet?
Well,
I don't know. I've never seen them. He's always asked. He said, what have I done? Show me what I've done. So, and I don't want to bring that argument to the table necessarily. But what I want to bring is, if you're saying South Africans voted against the ANC because of corruption, the question is, well, where did that vote go?
Yeah.
And if your answer is it went to a former president that's in and out of courts, and I'm not sure if indeed the story is true, that they voted for an anti-corrupt ANC.
Yeah.
You see, we can't ignore that.
There's a contradiction.
Exactly. So we can't ignore that contradiction, because it's pretty obvious that the South African voter, that for me, that really tells a bigger story is the voter that didn't pitch. That voter is saying, I do not trust the political structure. I do not trust these institutions. I do not trust any of this, whether you are the IEC, whether you're political parties, whether you're the police. I do not trust any of this. That is the voter that truly speaks louder in this election, and it's the least spoken about voter. That voter remains in the system. That voter can get you a president if they came out in numbers. So that voter, for me, is a voter that is always ignored, particularly these times. But it's a voter that, if you started cultivating that voter now as a politician, you will turn these elections around again in the next elections. That's just my opinion.
So now, David, in sort of like we've looked at it, and the truth is going to emerge over the next couple of days and weeks. From where you sit at the moment, as a South African with a lot of skin in the game, Are you feeling upbeat, downbeat?
I'm feeling upbeat that politicians, ANC, EFF, and everybody, I'm feeling upbeat that for the first time they know that the voter is aware of what they're doing. That for me matters. Whether that vote went to Msholozi or not, that for me, that makes me optimistic about the future of South Africa and future elections, including local government elections that's coming soon, so to speak, in another 2 years or so. So for me, that makes me optimistic that South Africans are not saying we are leaving this to the elders. They'll look after the family. They are now aware that we have to play a role in all this. And also, something that makes me feel positive is that the politicians are conscious. The voter is aware. The politicians are aware that we see you. And we are basically now, the game, the real story of this election for me is about South Africans that have made their voice loud enough for politicians to pause and listen. Because one can argue that the Phala Phala issue, when it was voted out of a potential investigation, it was a big deal. One can go back to Nkandla and say that was also a big deal. Those moments were important enough for a South African to say, I think this power is too much to these people. And that, for me, is an important moment in South African politics. Even a staunch supporter of the ANC, I've voted for the ANC more times than I've voted for any other party. Even I can tell you that this ANC needed a shift, needed a slap on, not on the wrist, needed a punch on the face, and which is what they got. And I'm sure if they were to sit in this very room and speak to you and were honest with cameras off, they'll say, we messed this one up.
Look, that was the crux of their campaign. Yes, we've made mistakes, but we're going to do better the next time.
Absolutely, they're not hiding that they know they made mistakes. But whenever you can't ignore the president's final State of the Nation address. He painted a glorified image of the ANC, and that concerned me greatly. I remember watching that, thinking, I don't know, man. You sound like you were never in the room when all this was happening, and that concerned me a lot. That President, you were deputy president during that time. Where in the world were you not invited to these conversations? Couldn't you do anything during that time? And that was my problem with Tumami now, the president. What's the new dawn?
Yes,
we all had our hopes.
We did. My takeaway is that there's two big shifts, the two big issues that I feel confident about. Still, and then we'll go into the stuff that perhaps is concerning. One is that we've broken this is Africa and people will just keep on voting for the party. Doesn't matter what
the liberation
movement,
yes,
the old ZANU thing, SWAPO, etc. MPLA, all of our neighbours, where it doesn't matter what the government does, they'll return a majority until eventually the opposition just stops even contesting the
or the leaders die.
And get replaced by
their sons.
Brothers and sons and wives. But we've broken that chain, I think. And
that's a big win.
It's a big win.
Yeah.
It's a big win. The other big win, I feel, let's hope, is that I think that the idea that people might have set in, that people will punish you if you put your party ahead of the country.
Yes.
And, in a way, I think that there was 3 examples of putting the party ahead of the country. The ANC have always done it. And obviously you talk about Phala Phala, but it wasn't only that. It was a case of we're going to close the ranks, party first, country second, even though we've got proof up the wazoo that there's something that needed to be investigated. So we understand the ANC, but they're not the only ones. Because I think the DA did it as well. Right? The country is saying, we don't want this party. We may like your policies. We may think that you run some things better than others, blah, blah, blah. But it needs to be more representative. They're treating this as a victory lap. It's a relative victory lap because they are still below where they were in 2014, but they at least advanced a little bit, whereas their 2 other rivals in the top 3 back then went backwards. So it's a relative win, right?
But I don't think the ANC celebrates this moment at all.
But I'm talking about, in the DA.
Yes,
They also put party ahead of
people, of South Africans.
Because South Africans said, not happy with the way your party looks. And they said, well, we've got our own idea and we will impose it upon you. And the EFF, I think, did their own version of it. You know, you've got what looks like a more and more strident leader who cannot be questioned. I mean, he's already said, don't even think about anybody else becoming leader of this party. I am going to lead it till I'm 80, until I'm his age. That's what he said. Did you see that?
Yeah.
You know, now that kind of gives people a little bit of pause for thought to say, hang on. Maybe this is not what we want. What happens if we do want new leadership? So I think that those are big wins in the long run.
That's true, but your statement assumes that South Africans got together and made that decision, that we will do this.
Yes.
South Africans are divided racially. The tribal issue, whether we ignore it or not, exists. South Africans are divided economically, and you keep going. You can divide us into pieces until the cows come home. That reality remains. So there's no unified South African ideology about what's going on right now. That's why we are so divided. Our politics even further reflect that. One thing that's clear, and it remains the biggest number, is that the South African that needs opportunity is one that's crying for help and continues to cry for help. They're crying for help to all these political elites, whether it's the ANC, the DA and EFF and all of that, or PA in this regard. And they're the biggest number. That number continues not to be given really the due that it deserves. And that's why they will always either not turn up for events, rather for elections at all, or they will vote in this fragmented way that we've seen. There's no unified, and I hear that commentary a lot, that South Africans have chosen. South Africans are not united in this logic.
Yeah.
They are divided in this logic. And what they've given South Africans collectively, what we've given South Africa is a further indication of how divided we are, particularly economically. And that's why there's still hope that the ANC will save us. That's why you get a 40%. That's why there's still hope that maybe the EFF is talking our language. That's why you get the 10% and the smaller parties. So that reality remains. And that's why the PA has done so well. We can't ignore what the PA has done. Their achievements are amazing. They were nothing 5 years ago to what they are now.
Yeah.
If there's anyone who's singing and dancing, is MK and the PA. No questions about that. So really the point I'm making is that there is no unified South African thought about what's going on. There's a fear for a better future, but there's a clear statement from South Africans, if they're united about something, is they want things to work. They want a country that works. They want a country that hires, that employs people. They want opportunities. That's what South Africans are saying. They want lights to work. They want water to be clean. They want hospitals to function well. So they want potholes to go away. They want crime to disappear. That's what South Africans are saying. All parties are saying we can solve these things. We just don't agree on the how. And that's why there's division. You look at all their manifestos, all of them say we're going to get you jobs. Even Musi Maiman is saying a job in every household. Everybody's saying I'll give you jobs. There's a guy who was running in this election in Atteridgeville. He was saying 3,500 rands if you're between the age of 16 and 20 or whatever it is. So everyone is promising these opportunities. But in reality, the world looks very different from the average South African who's in a taxi right now, who doesn't have money to go to work the following morning, who's going to a place where when they get off the cab, it's dark, the lights are not on, and they could be robbed between the taxi stop to their homes. Those are South Africans that most politicians tend not to they overpromise the South African and they underdeliver to the South African. And the South African is saying, I see you.
Well, I think that this election has given that message loud and clear, and David, you've summed it up perfectly. I think the hope is that while these parties have their negotiations, while they all vie for position, the most important thing I see is to see pictures of these politicians who haven't had a nice word to say to each other in 20 years, actually talking to each other, having a cup of tea together.
Who's that?
Yeah. It's in the. Yeah, I saw a photo of Helen Ziller with Nomvula Mokonyane, and all
Yeah,
these people.
they probably haven't spoken a
They
lot.
probably haven't spoken in years, but at least we're getting, at least there's some conversation. There's some understanding that to one degree or another, the country wants something different, and they expect more from the politicians. So, David Mashabela, King David, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us today.
I do
Everybody,
this on my show.
you do that, I'll do that too. Thank you. And I do this because Pace Car Rental sponsors this episode.
Hey.
Rent your car there. And subscribe and like the State of the Nation, and go visit King David.
King David Studio.
King David Studio for podcasts nearly as good as ours.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.